on media workers as an oppressor class. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I want to ask you a question. How many times have you seen a friend on social media who was freaking out about the latest smear campaign about Trump, and when you tried to explain to them that this was a fabrication, they say, well, that might be true, but I am seeing far too many similarities between Trump's rise to power and what happened in Germany right before World War II. Don't worry, you don't have to count how many times this interaction has happened. It's always so funny for me to imagine what is going on in these people's heads when they make these comments. It's as if they think they're a master sleuth seeing the future unfold and that they better inform their social media friend circles before it's too late. Because, of course, it's not like the most common mainstream media and general cultural narrative isn't also saying that Trump is literally Hitler, despite the fact that he might potentially make some economic changes that could legitimately help poor Americans, like when he ended the TPP. No, they don't care about anything like that. All they care about is the bad. And all they hear is the bad. The reason the average individual on the left is so disconnected from reality is because the average individual on the left trusts mainstream media and the regressive left blogosphere. And like Sargon of Akkad said in his recent video, which I got the title for my video from, people working in mainstream media have become somewhat of an oppressor class. That does sound extreme, but they are paid more than the average individual and get paid to be very clearly dishonest to convince people not to vote for their best interest. They tried to use fourth wave intersectional feminism to both defeat Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump in favor of Clinton Incorporated by calling their supporters racist misogynists. And even though it didn't work, they still have persisted after the election and have gotten worse about it. Unless somebody is exceptionally intelligent and cunning with dishonesty, these people in media are mostly people who are somewhat unaware that they are even oppressing people, because they have been rewarded with positions in media based on peddling the grievance narrative, and many of them have been given their positions or grown popular heavily by selling themselves with a personal victim branding that they probably believe themselves. The cat blacks of the world, the black trans women who have suffered from sexual violence and therefore must be incredibly woke, these people end up developing the worst kind of narcissism, which is that they are rewarded for traits about themselves that they cannot change, and they completely think they deserve the rewards they have been given from being simply the way they are. Can you imagine anything more vile than a straight white man who beat out several more qualified people for a position who were either racial minorities, women, or queer simply because he was a white straight man, only to have him gloat about how much he deserves his position for whatever reason he can come up with? That's precisely what we're dealing with here. But instead of gloating, these members of the regressive leftist media do something even more irritating, which is a bunch of people writing articles for blogs and stuff who basically whine all day about how rough they and everybody their identity has it, and how people who aren't of that identity just don't get it. Except black lesbians in wheelchairs who know everything. They complain all day from their ivory tower, usually because although they live in relative luxury, they are still in student loan debt or something. That's the small bit of consistency within the stories of members of the regressive media that probably keeps them going. They can complain about their lives in big, expensive urban centers because they still have a student loan debt to pay off, which they feel is crushing their souls. These people serve as nothing more than protectors of the realm of the regressive left. They protect the crooked Wall Street Democrats in their comfy positions and protect themselves in their own jobs. In universities, adjunct professors regularly screw over young people by tricking them into or demanding that they study humanities bullshit to become brainwashed and paranoid, wasting their student loan money, which will fuck them for the rest of their life. simply so that they can indoctrinate a few more people to protect their position as underpaid quasi-aristocrats that teach at universities. I think perhaps even most of these people know that they are liars. And I'm starting to realize that they've seemingly known longer than we have, which is weird because it seems like we've known for a long time. However, these people just don't care. These are people who realize that in order to get paid, they had to lie. And usually, because of their student loan debts, they took that deal with the devil and continued to lie, even though they knew they were doing it once they realized what you had to say to get published on a feminist blog, and what you couldn't say. Fortunately, there is a resistance to all of this, which, although is probably technically a lot smaller in numbers, happens to be a lot more influential because the ideas are better. Though I just reached 7,500 subscribers on YouTube today, which isn't all that big, I like to see myself as part of this resistance. And I don't think that that is a particularly egotistical thing to say. I think anybody with any common sense that isn't afraid to speak their mind is part of this resistance. Join the resistance. Years ago, when somebody on Facebook would post something to the effect of, "How is Islamophobia not racism?" I would say in response, "Because Islam is not a race." Then they would say, "Oh, this guy again." I don't even think that they were referring to me as an individual. I think that this was their canned response for when anybody said something that made any sense but violated the regressive narrative. I've even had people mock me for being logical. They'd say, "Oh, look at this dude bro trying to share logic and facts," as if they were obviously rolling their eyes because that is clearly a bad thing. It will probably take a lot of people a really long time to even approach an understanding of things like the skeptic YouTube community, because they think in such tribalistic absolutes that they cannot have their ideas challenged without assuming that somebody is entirely on the other side, and that they are some sort of Nazi fascist. Skeptics generally challenge the dominant cultural narrative by nature, so we end up criticizing the left because they dominate the cultural narrative, but the regressive leftists know that they are losing power. Still, they have no ability to compromise because of the way their power structures are so rigidly based around spreading ideologies instead of fairness, and therefore, they double down and end up calling everybody who's even a centrist or a skeptic a fascist. It's happened to me repeatedly. You see, when everybody who is hired at a media company is hired because they are dishonest, how could a new company policy to start telling the truth ever be implemented? The regressive left formed very deliberately to be a haven for various different people who thought they had it rough growing up because of their identities. But it has now grown into a gigantic cultural sphere of people who cannot admit that they are now wrong and are an oppressing force towards hardworking Americans who happen to be white or male or really just have the wrong opinions. It can be anybody. They will largely never admit the errors of their ways, not only because it's an act of personal integrity that might not be in their capacity, but also because it would require believing that all of their friends and the media they enjoy is wrong about basically everything. These people are too scared to take the red pill, because nobody has ever told them that they'll have any friends or television shows to watch on the other side. And so they take the blue pill again and again and again and again. These people don't realize that the narrative that they and their entire Facebook friend list is peddling just isn't true anymore. And they cannot contemplate that there's other social realities outside of what shows up on their Facebook friend list. They might be slightly aware of the concept of echo chambers, but they don't realize that they are in just one of several regressive leftist echo chambers that are on one side of the social media block wall. The gigantic cultural wall that separates entire schools of thought based on the combined total of all people blocked by certain social spheres, ensuring that some people have no idea that other people even exist on the other side of the block wall. On the other side of that block wall that borders the edge of their individualized regressive left echo chambers, there are libertarian conservatives, religious conservatives, people who ended up voting for Trump to stop Clinton Incorporated, and all sorts of other people. Unfortunately, the people on the left-wing echo chamber side of the block wall have no concept of how these people think at all. They barely even know that they exist, or how many of them there are, and so they can believe Kenk Uger when he says that Milo Yiannopoulos doesn't actually have any fans. However, people on the right-wing side can see exactly what the left-wing side is thinking pretty well because they know what they are watching and reading, so they can get a pretty good impression. That all said, it's extremely easy to oppress people if you first dehumanize them. And what is more dehumanizing than calling somebody a fascist or a Nazi? Well, the only thing that's really more dehumanizing than that is when people don't even realize that people on the other side of the block wall even exist. And so, the regressive left will continue to oppress the masses until new media gets powerful enough to stand up to them, which is finally happening. That's all for tonight. Drop me a comment, help me out on Patreon if you think I'm cool, and stay tuned.